This is Strategist episode 1007. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Corey, Hogan, Stephen Carter. Guys, what is going on? It is October 13th. It is a Thursday. We are recording on a Thursday because you know why? Time doesn't matter, Stephen Carter. I know you've got nothing time-sensitive going on whatsoever.
Nope, nothing's going on. Just hanging out here with the raccoons in Vancouver.
Please tell me that wasn't a metaphor.
That makes me think that you're actually not in Vancouver. That's what that is.
I'm in Surrey. I'm in Surrey, and there's a lot of raccoons. Most of them are dead on the side of the road.
Yeah, now I'm sure it's a metaphor. Yeah, now I'm sure it's a metaphor. You've dug yourself into a hole. We've talked about your you know. Hey, by the way, did that large lawn sign guy ever deliver the lawn signs? Did that ever happen? We never followed up on the
there was no follow through.
Yeah, there was no follow through, which is
there's not really a lot of accountability on this show. Zane.
He calls the candidate.
I haven't noticed.
He calls the candidate at midnight and says,
he calls the candidate. That seems like a campaign manager failure right there.
No,
that he's got the candidate's number.
He does not have my number. He is not allowed to call me.
Okay.
So he calls the candidate at midnight, says, I just put out more signs, and I go back and I count the signs, and there's still the same number of signs. So I have no idea where he's getting the signs from. But you know what? It's all good. It's all good. We ran into the opposition's bus today. So that's pretty exciting. I don't know what that means. Bus. No, they have their own bus.
Is that a metaphor?
They're running for mayor of Surrey and they've got a bus?
Yeah, they have a bus.
Is that a common thing? Is that to run over the raccoons?
Is it just like the number 3 and they're just going up and down on it? Or?
Well, I mean, traffic is quite bad here. So if you get your bus stuck in traffic, a lot of people are going to see it. So
okay, I asked, but I actually don't care. Zane, how are you? We missed you in the last episode.
Yeah, we did.
Let me tell you something. I'm
Patreon exclusive.
I am living the life of a white man. I am in the Rimrock Hotel. I'm on the 9th floor. It is a very nice floor. The 9th floor. For those who know, it's the top floor. I'm doing well. I couldn't make last episodes because I'm doing important stuff.
That's
once
fair.
again.
But I did want to give
I also left the previous episode early because I had more important stuff to do than this podcast.
That is actually...
It's almost like I'm better than this podcast. I don't know. That's what people have been saying.
Okay. Well,
we are selling posters with my face on it, so it's not like my ego is inflated at all. It's not like you guys are contributing to the problem. What?
Okay.
Well, we know you're better.
Last time when Stephen wasn't on,
yes,
we gave him a chance to weigh in and kind of do a lightning round.
Yeah.
So I'm going to list 8 topics that we went through, and I'd like you to say expand on that for each of them so we don't miss the Zain Velji experience.
Wait, after the 4th, I will make a quip about Flair Airlines, just so you know. Okay, perfect. Go on.
Okay, that's good. All right. Danielle Smith was sworn in alone. Kenny ghosted her. God, you're even too slow. Like, this is too ponderous.
Come on,
let's go. Yeah. Come on, we got to go. Go.
Can we unpack that? Can we unpack that a bit?
Okay, Kenny ghosted her. Hinshaw was fired.
That.
Promised to overhaul AHS.
Wait, tell me more.
All right, I'm done with this bit. I don't think it wasn't funny from the start. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, Flair Airlines, not funny from the start. Let's move it on to our first segment. Our first segment, Fine, Fabulous, or Fucked. Guys, we are here. There's so much to talk about. It is a classic. We do this 3-prong scale. Fine. Everything is fine with this strategy. Fabulous. This is a masterstroke. This is political genius at work. Note it down in your little black book. Replicate it in your future campaigns. This is fabulous. Fucked. This goes in the trash bin. This is political strategy at its worst. This is not playing your hand well. Carter, there's so many things going on in Canadian politics, but I have to start with Alberta politics. Let's start here.
Yep.
Fine, fabulous, or fuck. Danielle Smith, on the day after, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I don't have it in front of me, on the day after talking about the most discriminated group in her lifetime being the unvaccinated, comes out with an apology, I put that in air quotes, and a clarification. Mm-hmm. Carter, the strategy to apologize and the apology itself, fine, fabulous, or fucked in your mind, give it to me straight.
I think it's fucked. I mean, I think that, when you apologize like that, first of all, you're dragging a story. You're much better off to do a channel changer than an apology. So she managed to drag the issue forward, but I guess she was getting killed anyways. But the apology itself also was pretty fucked. I don't think that it actually achieved what she was trying to achieve, which is to put things behind her. I think that instead it inflamed a group of people that still think that she's completely wrong. I mean, Evan Solomon, your friend Zain, Evan Solomon, the man that you've modeled your entire life after, tweeted that, what about the 47,000 people who passed away? What about those people? And that I thought I got a lot of traction, 2,500 likes, but Evan had like a gajillion retweets. His was huge. Like, what happened to the people who died? Why are we suddenly focusing on those people who wanted to carry the virus around with them? So, and the misinformation's staggering. The number of responses I had to my own tweet of people like just absolutely losing the plot. And the fact that Danielle wants to appeal to them, man, talk about emboldening the wrong people.
Corey, I'm going to read a segment from this letter put out by the Premier the next day after those comments were made at her press conference. I want to be clear, this is quoting Danielle Smith, that I did not intend to trivialize in any way the discrimination faced by minority communities and other persecuted groups, both here in Canada and around the world, or to create any false equivalence to the terrible historical discrimination persecution suffered by so many minority groups over the last decades and centuries. Talking in the past tense, apologizing, trying to, in a sense, Corey, find fabulous or fuck the political strategy, the messaging strategy of Danielle Smith putting out this letter the day after.
Look, I think it's fucked. I think on its, like, let's just strip away everything else and say after her very first press conference, within 24 hours, she needed to walk it back. I don't even need to provide additional details for people to know that was a bad day for Danielle Smith. But let me make a fine case that I think I've already undercut by telling you I think things are actually fucked. But why this may actually still work out for Danielle Smith, depending on what the NDP does next, depending on how the public moves with this particular issue. This is a move of Danielle Smith's that I think that her opponents should take note of, which is she kind of just says like, "Aw shucks, sorry, but not sorry." Like it's a very similar approach to when there was footage that was brought up, or I guess audio clips of her saying, "Oh yeah, you can cure cancer just by having a better diet before it's stage 4," or the comment she made trivializing smoking. She'll say, "Yeah, geez, that wasn't good of me. Maybe not a full apology, but moving on." Right. And the problem I think that opponents will find, and again, I don't want to overstate it, is that for a certain percent of the population, that'll be good enough. And so when you spend the next 3 days demanding a sincere apology, a lot of people will say, okay, enough. Like, she walked it back. She clearly realized it was a screw up. You don't need to continue running on this. And you're sort of leaving the door open for her to say, look, I said that I shouldn't have said that, but here's why I believe X, Y, and Z. And if you get pushed on it, she says, yeah, I said I was sorry. It doesn't matter if she actually said sorry, but here's why I think X, Y, and Z. And I just don't think it's going to be particularly a fruitful line of attack. However, she's also sown some seeds that can, grow carnivorous plants that attack her. I don't know. This metaphor is already in trouble because
you knew it the second you opened your mouth, but it's fine.
I've already going. I just rattled off very quickly 3 things where she said, oops, sorry. And I'm not even talking about some of the big things like the floor crossing. Oops, sorry. Shouldn't have done that. Right? Yeah. Lake of fire. Oops, sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Climate change denial. Oops, sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Denial of climate change denial. Oops, sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Now that I've become more extreme in my views again. And there really is kind of this thing that she's done where she's created this pattern of gaffe and apology. And I think she's vulnerable on that. And people saying, like, what is this? Like, what will Danielle Smith be apologizing for tomorrow? It would not necessarily be a bad line of attack on her. And she's leaving it open to people through these constant streams of actions and walkbacks. And it's sort of rooted in her personality. She talks to somebody, she hears something, she repeats that comment, she believes it, but she's taken their rhetoric. And then she's got some cleanup to do because this is not a radio show anymore. It's the province of Alberta and it's the government of Alberta.
And Corey, you and I were chatting about this, this week, which is exactly to your last point. This is how a radio show host operates, right? Like you have 6-minute segments, you plan out the segment roughly in your mind, you kind of throw something out there, you lob a few grenades into the mix, you see how the calls and the texts are going. And if they're not going too well, you abandon. And if they're going great, controversy is not a bad thing. You extend the segment, right? Like I've had to fill in for shows. That's kind of how it works. You've got 8 segments over 2 hours. You plan 6 of them, and you keep a couple flex based on what's up. I could see that vibe. Like I could see that shock sort of like vibe from her in this first week. And to your earlier point that both of you have made, we haven't really seen her lead anything, right? Like we haven't really seen her lead anything in the past, and she's kind of taken on persona might be a bit of a reach, but she's kind of taken on that radio persona that many would be familiar with, and it's kind of extended it to the Premier's chair in some way.
Well, and I think one of the things that is going to be interesting to see is if the same tricks that worked for her in opposition and radio actually have that currency going forward. But part of that will require the other side not falling for those tricks, right? And not getting distracted by the thing that is ultimately the petty grievance rather than the major grievance. Like her apology not being good enough is a petty grievance. And I saw Rachel Notley was talking about it today. I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, she should demand a sincere apology for one day. But if she's still talking about this 2 days from now, I think that's a bit of a mistake by the NDP. If you're not talking it in, laddering it into a bigger attack on Danielle Smith's character, or something along those lines, because it's only going to take you so far to say the apology wasn't good enough.
Carter, I'm gonna keep on Danielle Smith, but I'm gonna go with something different. Fine, fabulous, or fucked. Danielle Smith in pundit mode, talking to Rick Bell, talking about her pathway to victory, right? And you've been someone, to be totally clear, who's been a big advocate of open source strategy, right? Like being very clear about your pathway to victory. So I'm asking you first for a reason. She tells Rick Bell, saying, listen, the way I win the next election, I'm paraphrasing here, right? I don't have it in front of me. I win rural Alberta and I win half of Calgary. Now, to be clear, the UCP have more than half of Calgary right now, for those from outside of the province. And even from those inside the province, that's where the current math shakes down in terms of the seats that they hold. Fine, fabulous, or fuck. Danielle Smith kind of entering a bit of pundit mode, back to our radio shock jock sort of commentary earlier. Fine, fabulous, or fucked, Carter. Danielle Smith in this particular interview and with this particular message?
I think it's fucked. She's not the campaign strategist. She's the premier. And it's not even like she's the opposition leader. I can almost see, Notley sitting down with Rick Bell and explaining her path to victory. And that almost makes sense to me. But when you're the premier and you currently hold 75 or 90% of the seats in Calgary, which seats are going to go away? And I'll tell you something, the people who are sitting in those seats currently, they know which seats are going to go away. They know which seats Danielle's talking about. And they're not real comfortable, I think, at this stage. They know that they're being written off in order for MLAs in rural Alberta to hold on to their seats. And that does not promote caucus unity. When you have a caucus, you are at the very least pretending that you're going to win every seat. You have to pretend that because all those caucus members are going to fight for you. They're going to make sure that you have the victory in the end, and you can't predict which seats you wind up with. There are seats that I thought for sure we would hold in 2012 that we didn't hold, and seats I thought for sure that we would lose that we kept. So you've got to be able, in a position, especially if you're the actual leader, to say this isn't, we are going to fight for, we know the battleground is Calgary. I have a path to victory in Calgary, and that means winning every seat that we can win. And I think that would have been a better strategy discussion. If someone needs to talk to Rick Bell off the record and color in the color by numbers that he requires in order to understand election strategy, then someone else can do that afterwards.
Corey, I'm gonna ask the same. They're just like drive-bys in a candidate bus, Carter. Corey, one day I hope your candidate gets a bus. Maybe it'll be one day. Maybe it'll be one day. For one day, I should say. I
was in the bus with Joe Clark. That was a pretty good one.
Oh God, hear the stories. Yeah. Do all your stories involve driving or mothers against drunk driving? Corey, over to you. Fine, fabulous, or fuck. Danielle Smith in pundit mode, talking about her electoral pathway, her electoral map. Carter, I will loop back to you on the campaign strategist versus candidate role. But Corey, to you, fine, fabulous, or fucked. Danielle's take here.
Yeah, it's fucked because of many of the things that Stephen said, but I want to expand on them. Government always has a formula for government. It's to win the same things. And so sort of walking back from that and saying, actually, we're going to try to win a little bit less. I think it's just, it's not showing a lot of strength for starters. It's interesting, right? But even if you're not in government, and I have some experience with this, there is an expectation that you compete and you fight and you win in all of the seats that you previously held. And I think in 2012, I was running the campaign for the Alberta Liberal Party, which at the time had won 9 seats the previous election, but there had been a couple of floor crossings and all of this. And ultimately, I think at dissolution, there were 6 or 7. And we knew we could only win 5 on a great day, but we had to compete in all of the 9 that we'd previously won. That was an expectation. It wasn't just an expectation of caucus, because in some cases caucus wasn't there, but also of the members in that organization, right? It's this idea that you've got political parties are supposed to self-perpetuate. They're supposed to be growth. And yeah, I mean, sometimes you go into an election, you're going to lose a few, but even in those cases, you put on a brave face, you go out there. And I mean, I agree with Stephen. The people who are at jeopardy know they're at jeopardy. I mean, you could basically take out a map of Calgary and say anything touching the edge of the city maybe is in Danielle's plan. Anything not is basically being ceded to the New Democratic Party, and that's an awful lot of the city at this point. And I just don't know. Like, I'm having trouble putting myself in the seat of like a UCP MLA from one of those ridings that's at risk. It's like, can you imagine a Calgary caucus meeting? Danielle Smith's there and she says, look to your left, look to your right. 1.5 of you won't be here after the next election. And she's just won. I don't foresee like an instant problem. I've actually been pretty clear that I think that these people ultimately bark a lot more than they bite. But at a certain point, between kind of the disrespect to Calgary on the by-election, the sort of disavowing of your Calgary roots, saying like you're a rural operator, you're a rural gal, and then seeming willing to cede Calgary seats and maintaining a strong rural base. Like, at a certain point, do the Calgary MLAs not say, hey, hold on a minute here. I didn't sign up to be cannon fodder. I'm just a bit surprised in some ways that it's even gotten this far.
Yeah.
It just seems really brazen of Danielle Smith to do.
Carter, would you say the same thing you just did? Both of you, right? Like, you guys are in the same lane here, so to speak. Would you say the same thing if her chief campaign strategist said that?
I would. I bet you Carter wouldn't, but I would. Like, when I think back to that same 2012 election, if the media had asked me where the Liberals think they're competitive, I would have said all of the 9 ridings where we were, there. But behind the scenes, like in the campaign office, we knew, 3 of those for sure, probably 4. There was not a chance in hell. And so you just kind of put on, a brave face and do the good fight, and you just try to make sure they don't bring you down and you don't allocate too many resources to it. But yeah, for like a public perspective, like you can't. Especially with incumbents in it. I mean, that's the most damning thing for me. It's hard for me to imagine doing that.
Yeah, because what I'm trying to tease out here is was this a messenger error, or was this both a messenger and message error, right, Carter? So talk to me about this. If this was you leading this campaign, you've always advocated open sourcing strategy. You've also advocated a bit of honesty. Didn't this hit both of those marks for what her chief strategist or her campaign lead should have said 7 months before an election, or no?
Yeah. I mean, there's 26 ridings in Calgary, Rick. What I'm aiming for is to win all 26 ridings. But I think that's going to be a stretch for us this time. We're going to, we have excellent MLAs running in every riding. We are going to pick up a few new faces through retirement. I can't wait to see what they can do. But the math is simple. If we won half, we will win the election. But our goal is to win each and every seat.
That's what you'd say as a campaign strategist.
Well, keep in mind that in 2012, we were down to 34 seats in our internal projections. Mm-hmm. I didn't run around and tell everybody, hey, we're at 34 seats in our internal projections. I told people our strategy for winning the government, because that was the end game. You don't handicap yourself, especially at the beginning of the race, by saying, you know what, if we come in 6th, that's going to be amazing for us. You've got to be in a position where you at least have a strategy to win this game that you're playing. And Danielle has now given away half the seats in Calgary. which I think is a tremendous mistake.
Corey, is there any strategy in that? Pressure on your opponents?
Maybe.
Pressure on your, I'm not saying it's good strategy, but is there any strategy in there? Pressure on your opponents. No. I'm just kind of throwing these out there, right? Maybe lowering the bar for yourself, surprise and delight, lower expectation. What do you kind of think of schools of thought in that direction? Carter, you're shaking your head no, but I'll let Corey go first and then we'll let you jump in there on Carter.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of a common thread for the past couple of months for me, and it will probably be a common thread going forward, which is I sometimes think like we should be a little bit more charitable about what she's doing because it has worked to date. And if I'm trying to look for the method in the madness here, it's, well, it is honest and it is pretty frank and it is a straight shooting politician who's saying it like it is. Everybody knows the UCP is not as popular as they were before the last election. Do we really think they're going to go up in seats? No. Which are the ones that are going to come off? Probably these ones. And in a way, doesn't it avoid some of the bullshit that you often have to put up with if you're a campaign director? Like I think back to my campaign, actually, as I was giving my last answer and I was saying like, yeah, we had to give resources to seats we didn't think we had a chance in. That's not optimal. That's not a very good idea, but I had to do it because of some sort of sense of party unity, right? And this idea that you got to fight for the things you got to fight for. And she's just saying, fuck that. That's not necessarily a good idea. And part of me says, yeah, that's not necessarily a good idea. Now,
you're not
if she can manage the internal dissent.
Yeah.
I'm not, but I have to say, it's not like it's 100% downside. I think that the party dissent thing is just too much of a hill for me to get over, especially because those seats had incumbents, or they have incumbents. But let's not pretend there's not some potential upsides here. And it is very keeping with Danielle Smith's strategy of just kind of ping, moving on to the next thing. And frankly, we've spent an awful lot more time talking about this than her apology / non-apology.
Carter, jump in on this because
the last episode talking about her faults. I mean, this is ridiculous, though, Corey. I mean, what was her weakness in the last time, right? What was her weakness when she was the leader of the Wild Rose Caucus? It was caucus management.
Yeah, it was a blind side to their needs. Yeah,
her very first action as the leader of this new caucus, before they've even gotten together as a caucus, is to essentially say to half of the people that she needs to win in the next election, well, you guys are fucked. How's that going to do for caucus morale as they get ready to fight an election that they know is going to be tough, that they already knew they were coming from behind the 8 ball because they ditched their last leader over it. They said to the last leader, you're not going to get us over the top. Get the fuck out of here. We're getting a new leader. New leader comes in and says, well, half of you guys are screwed. Good luck to you. I mean, basically, take a look. Jason Copping, Nicolaitis, there's a ton of people in the north, cabinet ministers. Tyler Chandra, are these people going to be cabinet ministers? She's also not just saying you're going to lose your seats. She's saying you guys have had the privilege of being cabinet ministers, and I'm going to take some of that away too. I'm going to take away $60,000 a year from your paychecks. I'm going to take away your car. I'm going to take away your responsibility, and then I'm going to say to you, good luck getting elected, because half of you are going to go, half of you are going to die.
Corey.
Well, you're not wrong.
Our episode title. It is going to go after you're going to die.
It is a recipe for dissent, right? You're taking away their privileges that they're afraid of losing potentially, and if you kind of have a Venn diagram then with people who think they're going to lose the election, what reason do they have to kind of maintain the party whip and toe the party line? It becomes one of those things where you say, well, fuck you too. I've got this job for a good time, not a long time. So exactly. I might as well go down on my own terms. And that's dangerous, right? You only have so many levers as leader. One of them is dance. If you're premier, it's dance for the cabinet seat, which is being dismissive, and I shouldn't be. It's perform for the cabinet
seat. It's totally what it is. You can be dismissive. And then the cabinet's going to come. They're auditioning for cabinet at their retreat.
Yeah.
This is actually going to happen next week. They all know it too. They all know that they're auditioning for cabinet.
Well, and then the very next thing there is, if you don't have that, then you at least try to have the fear of you're going to lose your seat if you don't keep it together, because they do. Like, government has a blueprint for winning. You do the same thing, you stick together, we're as good as last time, you're going to keep your seat. And then when you abandon that, I mean, there's not a lot to lose, right? And that's
there's nothing left. Yeah.
Carter, what was the quote again? Half are you gonna what? Half are you gonna die?
Half are you gonna die.
What's the first part? Half are you gonna
half
lose?
Half you're gonna lose your car.
Half you're gonna lose. Half you're gonna die. Corey, here it is. Okay, it's a shirt. In the middle, half of the people are losing, and in the other half, the people are dead, but they're actually raccoons. Okay, and then we put it up on the strategist.ca. Okay, I'm just giving you a golden idea.
That's great.
They're just dead raccoons. Just, maybe front and back. Maybe we could do a dual. Guys, I mean, whatever we need to do. Whatever we need to do.
I don't like to brag, but I actually put money is the currency of politics in a news release this week in Surrey, and I put the little TM for trademarked.
That's very.
You want to
nice.
know what really sucks? Not one journalist in Surrey got the reference.
Well,
not one.
But it's trademarked too. So
I'm very upset.
Yeah,
they couldn't.
Did you hyperlink to the mug?
I should have hyperlinked to the mug. What?
That's a mistake. That's the mistake. Can I stick in Alberta for a sec? Or are you guys tired of Alberta? Because I was going to.
You know what? You've got the reins, man. We just follow you. We just follow blindly.
Corey, fine, fabulous, or fact. Let's focus on Danielle Smith on one final thing, and I think this opens up an interesting conversation on lines of attack and messaging. She's got a meme out there. She's got several memes about the Trudeau Notley Singh alliance. This one is interesting. Mm-hmm. This one is about Rachel Notley saying that she's afraid of Danielle Smith, and what Albertans are afraid of is Rachel Notley and her alliance with Jagmeet Singh.
Yeah, I saw this one. Yeah,
fine, fabulous, or fuck that messaging strategy from Danielle Smith. We've seen the playbook of they, he, she, whoever is afraid of me. It's desperate. They're like, they're look at how desperate they are. Look at how panicked they are. They're afraid. What do you kind of think of that message, given the political dynamic now, given the 7 months of the election? Your take on that? Fine, fabulous, or fucked?
Yeah. So this particular meme or whatever that she put together, this post that I think you're referring to, had 3 pictures of Danielle Smith just doing kind of normal things, like smiling with kids and at a barbecue. And I can't remember the third picture.
Yeah, with the pumpkin, with doing a Star Trek hand gesture, I think.
Oh, that's right. It was at Vulcan. Yeah. That's exactly what it was. And then Vulcan's a city or a town in Alberta, for those who don't know. There's a Star Trek statue there. And then the other one was underneath, and it says what Albertans are afraid of. And it showed a picture of Rachel Notley with Justin Trudeau and a picture of Rachel Notley with Jagmeet Singh, and then a picture of Jagmeet Singh with Justin Trudeau. And the implication being this is all part of that alliance they're talking about, this Notley, Trudeau, Singh alliance. I thought it was very funny, by the way, that there was no picture of all 3, so they had to cobble it together with like pictures of 2 of them in multiple different situations.
They had to use the transitive property.
Yeah,
it's the Stephen Carter. If you won't endorse me, I'll endorse you. I'll endorse you if you won't endorse me. Good point, though. Because they haven't been seen in a room together.
Because it's not actually a Notley Trudeau Singh alliance. Not to state the blindingly obvious here.
It's like the thank you for smoking, where they're the merchants of death at the back table. That does not happen with these 3.
But I think it's fine, because I think we know that there are a number of Albertans who will kind of latch onto it. Now, social media is not everything. And in fact, it's not even a good thing most of the time. But one of the things I often check is kind of the ratio of comments to likes on this. And generally speaking, she's still got more people on her side who really like it than people who are coming at her. Although I think those ratios are not necessarily as good as you might hope when it's just your first days on the job. So remains to be seen, but it's certainly red meat for the base. And I don't think she's going to lose any votes for it. I'm just not convinced she's going to gain any either. So I think it's fine.
Well, what do you think of the first part of the message? I found that to be the more intriguing part. The Notley Singh Trudeau alliance, we've heard it before. What do you think of the, Rachel Notley's afraid of Danielle Smith?
I think that wasn't actually what I kind of latched onto when I saw that.
That's
I'm
interesting.
To be totally honest, Zain.
Okay, yeah.
What I latched onto was that she was trying to show how normal and nice she was at the top, right? Like it's just her being a bit of a nerd in front of a Star Trek statue doing the Vulcan salute.
That's
her hanging out with a bunch of people, and she was trying to make the point. I felt not that Rachel Notley was afraid of her, but she's not actually scary. Is the point I thought she was trying to make. It was almost like this eye rolling, like, oh yeah, Rachel Notley's so afraid of me. I'm so scary, is the way I read that first half. And I think you're going to see more of that in the next bit. She's really going to kind of lean into this personality of hers, which is kind of like smiley and aw shucks and nicest person in the world. Like, I'll tell you, I have a lot of friends who worked with her in the newsroom in the Herald, and like to a person, they will say what a delight she was. Like, boy, raised by wolves, very conservative, but super nice, super nice. And I think that's our three personal experiences as well on an individual level.
Carter, I read that a bit differently, but reading it again, I see Corey's interpretation, like Danielle trying to perhaps normalize as much as she is her policies, her persona to the public. In your take, Carter, fine, fabulous, or fuck, this message lane that the UCP have started, or at least Danielle Smith's UCP have started after her election?
Well, I think Corey's take, before we go any further, is truly fucked. Yes, Danielle's is fucked because, tell me what you're for before you tell me what you're against. And maybe I'm old school on that, but here's this woman who's defined by the Sovereignty Act, who's defined by tearing apart the institutions of Alberta, who is really just the moment she's been sworn in, she doesn't even have a cabinet yet. And all she's doing is just attacking, and creating, as Corey indicated, the only part of Corey's nonsensical drivel that I was able to actually grab onto.
Okay.
She's trying to create this Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau thing. Why would you do that? You don't need to tie Rachel Notley to Trudeau. You just need to go after Trudeau. That's enough, right? We didn't tie Jeremy Farkas to Jason Kenney in the Gondek campaign. We just went after Gondek. We just went after.
Is that enough,
Kenney.
Carter? Walk me through the strategy of how.
Because you're standing up for me. You're standing up for me. That's all I need. All I need is to see that the person who's on the political dais is fighting for me. That's a primary message in politics. Are you fighting for me or are you fighting against me? And Danielle Smith, with the 20% who love her, the people who will retweet and like the things that Corey's going and checking on social media to determine whether or not something's successful or smart.
It's coming from the guy who had a real retweet envy of Evan Solomon, but keep going.
Yeah, you literally just gave us your like counts on your most recent post.
Well, because it was mine, and that matters to me because I'm a shallow man, and that's fine. We all know I'm a shallow man. I'm fine with that. But here's, I just think, Corey, that this is a huge mistake from Danielle because it also opens up the field for Notley. And if you look at what Notley's doing, what is Notley doing? What's her response? First of all, the pictures of all the volunteers going out in Calgary or in Lethbridge, right? Or no, Medicine Hat. All the pictures of all the door knockers going out in the twilight hours. For the most part, Rachel Notley is able to say, we're going to fight against the Sovereignty Act for you. We're going to fight against the crazy ass shit that Danielle Smith is doing. And Danielle is doing such a crazy attack on Rachel that it's just missing. It's just missing completely. So don't do that, Danielle. And if you're Rachel Notley, just keep doing what you're doing. Show people that you're willing to fight. This race down in Medicine Hat and Brooks could be a much more interesting race than anybody would have given it credit for.
Corey, do you want to jump in on Carter's assault on your answer?
On my honor, in fact.
On your answer, yes.
Well, I think what Carter's brought up is an interesting question about how the NDP responds to these kinds of attacks, right? If at all. And generally speaking, I think the proper approach is to ignore them. And I don't fault the NDP for what they're doing on this particular front, keeping their eyes on the prize. But that's going to be challenging, and they need to continue doing it. Like, one of the things they're going to have problems with the NDP with Danielle Smith, is she presents on just so many targets, and keeping that a coherent argument against her is going to be difficult, right? And
I think you called it, what did you call it as relation to Pierre, filling the pantry, right? Like, and that same sort of MO Danielle seems to have in some ways. Do you not consider it to be the same?
I mean, I think it's a little bit different in this context. What I'm saying the NDP needs to sort of watch out for here, and Carter's pointing at his head. Yes, we see there's no hair there. Been true for quite some time. What I think the NDP
you know who does have hair there is Evan Solomon. Keep going, Corey.
Oh, it's true. What they need to keep in mind is that some of the things, like your apology is not good enough, it can't register the same amount of outreach as the end of rule of law in the Alberta Sovereignty Act. And so the challenge, I think, for the NDP is one of there's just too many targets and they're not all equal. And it's going to be hard not to be distracted along here. And it's going to be hard not to have the hit of the day on Danielle Smith, but actually the story of the campaign about Danielle Smith.
Carter, Corey, you wanted to jump in on a particular point. I don't know which one it was.
Corey has had a remarkable recovery from his absolutely shitty post to coming in. We need to introduce message discipline to the NDP. We have 3 messages in Surrey. 3. And everything that I'm doing fits into those 3 boxes. And if it doesn't fit into those 3 boxes, we're done. And the NDP needs to decide what its 3 boxes are and never, ever move out of them. And when they think that they're talking too much about it, when they've been repeating it for ad nauseum for too long, and people must have heard this, no one has heard it. Stay within your message box, create the 3 boxes that you're going to be in, and stay there until until June 2023. Do not leave your message box.
Corey.
Yeah, I want to build on that because the message box also, I think really can't be all negative. The idea of just 2 battleships blowing each other up and seeing which one sinks less is I worry about that. For the province, I think that would just be sort of an ugly fight. And I do think the NDP need to think about their positive messages too. What does it mean to vote for NDP at this particular time? We've always said the NDP are a brilliant opposition. But one of the things that's going to add an interesting dynamic to this coming election is there's just such a high level of known commodity. We know what Premier Rachel Notley is like. We know, we will know what Premier Danielle Smith is like, but we know Danielle Smith. I mean, people are coming in with kind of high awareness numbers here, and people are going to want to understand, how will it be similar to your first term? How will it be different from your first term for both of these candidates? And what I think the NDP need to be very careful about is to make sure that they go in there and have coherent, compelling answers to that question. A way to talk about Alberta's future that can't be thrown back at them as kind of the managed decline of this province, because this province is so bloody titchy about so many sensible things that need to occur around energy transition. So you got to paint a positive picture for the next 20, 40, 60 years. The thing I always say is my youngest kid's not retiring until 2083. I'd like them to retire here. What the hell are they going to be doing in 2083?
Yeah.
Paint me a picture.
Corey.
I agree with Corey.
Fabulous.
Amazing.
Fucked. I'm moving to Ottawa. Well, not really. I'm moving to Pierre Poilievre. And I want to talk to you about a particular move in his critic roles for Pierre Poilievre, leaving out a very notable person in the conservative movement for the last, I could say, maybe decade. I might need to asterisk that. And, certainly maybe a decade elected and unelected. Michelle Rempel Garner does not find herself in a critic role amongst 50. Find fabulous or fucked the move by Pierre Poilievre as it relates to his electoral chances, the conservative movement, and what we're seeing is centered out of Ottawa for him. What do you think? Fine, fabulous, or fuck, leaving Michelle Rempel Garner on the sidelines?
I'm going to say fabulous. If only.
Interesting.
For 2 reasons. We have enough that's spilling out of the Conservative caucus that we know that things are not all good with Michelle Rempel Garner and her relations with the rest of her caucus. So this is consistent with what the caucus would want, but it is still a lot of inside ball. All of that disagreement between Michelle Rempel Garner and the caucus. When it spills out into the public, which seems inevitable, just given the amount of stories that have been heard, even the fact that it's bleeding into things like QP and her rolling her eyes at Garnet Genuous, right? Well, now it looks like sour grapes. Now it doesn't necessarily look principled. It's not, somebody who's powerful in the party, an up-and-coming star. It looks like somebody who's mad that they were left out of the shadow caucus or cabinet and has been given clear indication that they don't necessarily have a future in a Pierre Poilievre government. And so what's not to like? Caucus is going to like it. It nerfs somebody who might otherwise be a critic of you from the inside, which is always kind of a difficult critic to put up with. It's fabulous.
Carter, is it fabulous for you, Michelle Rempel Garner, on the sidelines of a conservative critic role? There was several of them, several dozen handed out, arguably. She's not one of them. Fine, fabulous, or fucked. Moved by Pierre Poilievre. What do you think?
Who am I playing in this game? Am I
Pierre and his viability and electoral chances. Fine, fabulous, fucked.
It's fabulous for Pierre. He gets rid of Corey's right. Oh, this is really painful for me. Corey's right. I didn't. Oh man, it's hard to say.
You don't think there was anything he could have done with as an overture to bridge building to either of you? Since I know where you're going now, Carter.
Well, no, because you build bridges with. He built bridges with all kinds of different people within the caucus, right? That he built bridges from his opponents. He brought in people who matter in the future of the Conservative Party, and he's sending a signal to Michelle. You don't matter in the future of the party. And you know what? That happens sometimes. We saw, what was his name? The finance minister who left Trudeau's government.
Morneau. How quickly we forget.
How quickly we forget. We did whole episodes on Morneau, and he's gone. And that was because of I think because of a dispute between the prime minister and his finance minister. And the prime minister always wins. The leader always wins. And if Michelle's not prepared to get in line and follow the leader, then Michelle needs to not be there. And I think, actually, Michelle should not be there. She should leave this. This is a great signal for her. This is a great time for her. There's other opportunities for her. Rona Ambrose has landed on her feet, done great things outside of politics. Michelle Rempel Garner can do great things outside of politics as well.
Well, so I have to ask you now that you brought this up, map it out. What does the off ramp look like for Michelle Rempel Garner? Right? If you were advising her right now, what would you tell her on a phone call? How would you tell her to leave? Would you tell her to leave mid stride? Would you tell her to leave quietly as nominations are being filled for the next election? Give me your take, Carter. What would you tell her if you were talking to her tonight?
If I was talking to her tonight?
Yeah, if you were talking to her. Yeah.
There's a world of opportunity, Michelle. That's all I would say. There's a world of opportunity. I mean, this is a very fluid field right now, and I do believe that Danielle Smith and Pierre Poilievre will be the last of this generation of a combined Conservative Party. I'd let them go straight into into the death spiral that will become from their inadequate leadership, and just stand by and wait, because shit's going to get real very quickly. And I would tell her, have a great time.
Yeah, Carter, you're being cryptic, but let me tease it a bit, unpack it a bit more. As I said up front, I've got many phrases for the same thing.
That was very clear.
You think progressive conservatism's coming back, don't you?
I think the center always does and always will prevail.
Oh,
Corey,
sure.
What's the advice? What's the advice you're giving Michelle Rempel Garner on an off ramp?
I think my advice would be maintain a range of motion. Keep your options open. And doing that means not going out in a blaze of glory and antagonizing caucus members who might otherwise support you, but just don't want to see that kind of strife and drama within the Conservative Party. So take this as your signal to exit, for sure. I think this plus all of the other reporting we have in terms of her discord with her caucus is good enough reason to say, okay, time to take a bow. Leave now, but don't leave in a like a fury. Find yourself a job, get yourself that job, leave your MLA position or MP position, and then move on to the next thing. Be nice, say nice things about Pierre Poilievre. I really hope he's the next prime minister. I'm rooting for this team. I was a member of this team. This is how I'm going to contribute to society for the next bit. Are you ever going to run for something like this? Well, I'll never say never, but I want to have time to spend with my family, and I want to connect back with my community. And geez, I know that sounds funny being like an MP, but I didn't want to be a career MP. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to do these things, and we'll see where life takes me. And that's also probably a good way to get better opportunities, because frankly, if you go scorched earth on Pierre Poilievre, that is going to affect your employment opportunities because people don't want to hire somebody who's picked a fight with the potential next prime minister.
Hey, Carter, can I ask? Go ahead.
Hang on
Carter.
just a second, Zain. I just wrote all that down because I'm actually going to write a book called How to Sound Like a Complete Pussy. And I'm going to open with that. That's
okay. That's great. That's great.
Oh, that's really good. Thanks, Corey.
I'm going to read this. This is an accounting textbook. Ooh. And, and it will tell me how to kind of balance sheets and make sure that things make sense at the end of the day. And that's the kind of, insight that I bring. You bring the pugilism. And I do. The unbalanced sheets.
One of us is the fighter, and the other one is you.
Carter, I'm going to ask an impossible question, but it won't be impossible for you because you're never afraid to tackle these sort of questions.
Nope.
Danielle Smith is 1 week into her premiership. Michelle Rempel Garner was contemplating running for the leader of the UCP. Seeing what happened with the result of the UCP, seeing what happened to Michelle this week, being left out in the critical, should she have run, Carter?
Should she have run? No, because had she won, and I guess that it's still up in the air whether or not she would have run.
Yeah.
Had she have won, she would just find herself in the spot where she's trying to figure out which of the MLAs to kick out of her caucus because they don't all fit. Maybe that's the signal that Danielle Smith is saying through I'm going to lose half of my MLAs is that she doesn't want them all to fit into her caucus. But man, this is an impossible group to lead. And watching Danielle try and do it is going to be interesting enough. Watching Michelle try and do it from I'm going to say the left center, which is hilarious given Michelle's kind of history. But man, she would really have a hard time. So I think that she made the right decision, the mature decision, and stayed out of that fight that it really wasn't hers to win.
Corey, fine, fabulous, or fucked. The governing Liberals federally are entering a 6-week review / inquiry on the Emergencies Act, right? This is the mandatory review that now begins. Fine, fabulous, or fucked for the Liberals. We're going to see a lot of testimony, a lot of strategy, a lot of positioning as what victory looks like. The fact that it's happening now, the fact that it's under these preconditions. Fine, fabulous, or fucked for the Liberals.
I think you've papered up a prediction question as a fine, fabulous, or fuck. Yeah. I think it really depends on what comes out of it. It depends on what we learn in terms of what the Liberals knew or didn't know when they made the decisions they made about invoking certain authorities and the way that they were invoked. So really too soon to say. I think in general for the country, this is going to be a pretty fucked 6 weeks because it's going to
You think so? This is what I kind of wanted to get to. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to bring the carnival back to town. And we are going to see under kind of the auspices of the parliament and all of the trappings that come with this, the same kind of lunacy that we saw in Ottawa, but it's just going to be lunacy now in a suit inside some nice wooden rooms with velvet floors. And that's going to unnerve me, frankly. But I'm also a little bit unnerved by the way the Liberals have applied some of their authorities in this case. And some of the reporting coming out of it makes me a little bit concerned that the Liberals did take some steps that were done for politics rather than public safety under the name of public safety. And that's not good either, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to give ammunition, like true credibility, to fringe groups, because people are just going to say, oh my goodness, maybe they were wronged if some of this reporting comes out the way it has the potential to do.
Carter, you seem to agree with Corey's response to my question around this overall framing of fine, fabulous, or fucked for this inquiry. What do you think? Is there any for the Liberals, as it stands right now, does it lean in any of these directions without, the 6 weeks being unpacked or have happened thus far?
What's our constant criticism of the Liberal Party under Justin Trudeau? They do not know how to respond to crises. This is a crisis that is, of their own making in some regard. They have not come out strong enough, in my opinion, for the support of the act. The base question seems to be, how should this act, could this have been brought under control without the act? Well, it wasn't brought under control without the act. And I think that, you don't want to necessarily put a big political spin on an inquiry, but, at the same time, put a little spin on the ball. I mean, these guys just seem to always want to fall on their own sword. Like, this is going to come after them, and they don't have a political strategy to stay out of it. Instead, what they do is they wait, and they're very honest about it. What's going to happen to us? Corey thinks we shouldn't have done anything political within the act, when this is a political action. The reason the act needs to be invoked in the first place is because the politics of this are front and center. It's a political action coupled with violence. And frankly, I don't like my politics with a side of violence, Corey. I'm an old fashioned guy who likes my politics with rhetoric and ideas and sparring. I'm painfully being disappointed today, but in other, more intellectual groups, you can have a back and forth on ideas and not bring violence into it. And then when people do bring violence, it needs to be met with law and order. And law and order was brought, and the government should be standing up and saying, if this could have been dealt with without this act, we would have dealt with it. But obviously it couldn't.
Corey looks pained.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Corey.
If the Liberals take this exhausting, rambling approach that Stephen Carter has just
Stephen Carter
demonstrated over
you mean
the past,
just wear out the shot clock?
Yeah, I don't know, was that 3 years or 4 years? It's hard for me to tell.
This is what the NBA was without the shot clock, just so people know. What Carter did right now is just a bunch of white guys dribbling for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what Carter just did. Just old, bald white guys just dribbling out for 8 to 10 minutes at a time.
That was the glory days, all right.
Zain, you're taking his side because I nailed it. Nailed it. That's what happens. Everybody knows.
I mean, it's so exhausting.
When I nail it, Corey.
It's the one hand dribble. The left hand would get no work whatsoever.
I cannot believe you say the left hand dribble on public radio.
Let's be fucking clear. There's been an awful lot of revisionism that has bled into more mainstream conservatism over the last bit here, where people have said things like, if you look at polling about how Canadians felt during the convoy versus how people think about the convoy now, you're actually seeing, some support increases for the convoy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because the Liberals aren't telling the story, because the Liberals have given up.
Because it is starting to move into this idea of myth, and there is with time past, that urgency, the reason the Liberals took those actions in the first place, and maybe there's some of your point here, people are forgetting that, right? And so the Liberals have to tell a story of urgency. Okay, I'm not disputing that. What I'm saying is what we might find in an inquiry is that it's not a story of urgency. We may find that the moment of maximum crisis passed before some of these decisions were made. We may find that some of the financial moves were actually significant overreaches. And by putting it back into the window for 6 weeks, it may exacerbate this kind of historical revisionism that we're finding about this, because people will forget the anxiety about the borders, and people will forget the idea that Ottawa was a place you couldn't even get a night's sleep for, days and weeks. And they are going to remember the government overreach, and it's going to retroactively make these people look less wild and less anti-democratic and less crazy than they were. And that is the big risk of this inquiry. And if they go into this with kind of that classic liberal bloviating that you put on display here, they are going to get fucking crushed. They need to have terse answers, smart answers, sharp answers, make clear lines.
Did you not watch the hearings in the U.S.? The January 6th Commission, where they brought forward all the violence, they brought forward the things that had been done in the name of this perverted sense of democracy, and showed the violence and showed how their system of government was at risk. And this is the opportunity. This was what was
But do you think they're going to do that, though, Carter? That's the thing.
No. I love this. I love this fucking example, because the January 6th Committee hasn't done shit to public opinion. Has not done shit to public opinion.
It is.
I agree with Corey. I mean, we're going to get to it, but the subpoenaing of Trump, like weeks, months late, hasn't done. I kind of agree with Corey. I mean, nice television style production and holding back the best shit for 6 months, right?
Talk to the base, and the Republicans are going to win the House. I mean, that's what we're looking at right now. Maybe the polls will be wrong on that front, but if the Republicans don't win the House, it won't be because of January 6th. It'll be because of Roe v. Wade. Okay?
Put a pin on it for a second, Carter. Put a pin on it for a second, Carter. I want to talk to Corey for a sec. So, Corey, the amount of energy that the Liberals should spend on bringing Canadians back to the severity and the unprecedented nature of that moment. Is there any risk by doing that? And I think you may have mentioned one, which is that that they may have been late, that they may have been caught flat-footed, and that their actions were on the downswing rather than the upswing. Yeah. And a lot of that is hindsight is 2020. But talk to me about how much effort you would put on storytelling that reality we all lived, but so quickly forgot in some ways.
Yeah, so I think this is actually the Stephen Harper playbook that needs to be done. Less is more. Say the one line that you need the media to report and say nothing else, because they'll have very little choice but to use that if that's the only quote that's provided. And I will often tell...
Give me an example, like say one line to describe the past. I'm trying to understand.
So in the inquiry, the chief of staff said, think of what the line would be here, but it's got to reflect actual facts too. But we had lost control of the situation in Ottawa, and after conversations with the Ontario government, we decided this was the only course of action that was left for us. And just repeat that time and time again, or whatever your line is, Zain. Like, it requires a better understanding of the facts on the ground, right?
Of course.
But then, and just don't afford a lot of ruminations on this. Keep your answers tight. And as I always say to clients in kind of media relations, especially like crisis communications and contentious communications, it's, there's an art to being quoted and there's an art to not being quoted. Now, our friend Stephen Carter is very good at being quoted.
Damn right.
But sometimes
7,000 words, baby.
Sometimes you just want to shut the fuck up, which our friend Stephen Carter is not particularly good at. And this is a situation where the Liberals just need to get through this 6 weeks. They need to make sure their messaging is tight. I'm not saying that they don't put a message out there. I'm saying they only put the message out there, and they don't start ruminating on a bunch of tangential things. They give the 4 facts that make their case, and they say very little beyond that.
Carter, I'm going
to wind up where I start, Corey. It's always nice to wind up where I start.
Yeah. Jesus. Okay.
What a show today.
Let's finish this off. Let's go to New Brunswick, and then let's go to British Columbia. Let's go to New Brunswick, Stephen Carter. Yeah. I'm going to go to New Brunswick. Do you know what I'm going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the education minister resigning. We talked about blazes of glory. I mean, this letter by the education minister resigning from the Higgs government, a blistering resignation letter in which he says change requires care, not a wrecking ball, that the Premier's initiatives have included things that are not in the throne speech, not shared or approved by us in cabinet or caucus. Saying that the Premier is effectively lied on his commitments. Saying I've worked tirelessly to prepare education systems for changes. Many are accomplished, but some stall because of your micromanagement, like directly to the Premier. Government is not the same as building oil tankers. Carter, A, have you seen anything like this? And B, fine, fabulous, or fucked going out in a blaze of glory like the New Brunswick, or I should say the former, because this resignation letter, I suspect, was accepted. The former education minister, Dominic Carty, in New Brunswick. Fine, fabulous, or fucked. And then, Carter, tell me if you've seen anything like this before.
I don't think I've seen anything. I mean, the closest I remember is Lord Snellgrove basically resigning from Alison Redford's cabinet, saying that this woman shouldn't be in charge of anything. Wow, did he ever prove to be right? Anyways, he left, and that's the closest I could recall. I mean, and it was hard to respond to, but that's the closest I can come to. I think that this is fucked. I mean, the idea that he said, I look forward to staying in the back benches of the PC party. I mean, I almost laughed out loud when I read that part. How do you expect to stay in the back benches of the PC party when you've literally just torn the wings off of your Premier? And, wow, it was beautiful. I mean, I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I loved it, but it was not necessarily smart politics.
Yeah, I mean, listen, your behavior at a recent meeting where you refused to even read evidence you had specifically requested, instead of choosing to yell, "Data my ass!" Like,
how does that not go into the strategist's, merchandise shop? Like, that's fantastic.
Corey, fine, fabulous, or fucked. Like, we've talked about how range of motion. This guy doesn't give himself a lot of range of motion.
He never had any range of motion. I mean,
and he probably didn't want any. So
this is a crazy. This is a crazy swing from an erratic individual. Like, most people aren't as tuned. I mean, I'm not that tuned into New Brunswick politics, but he was the New Brunswick New Democrat. I think he might even have been leader. And then he joined the Higgs government. He was never going to be the next in line because of some of that background. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to create folk hero status for himself. Now, does he have a point? Yeah, fucking probably, right? I mean, I'm guessing, but it's a situation I think is as much to aggrandize him as it is to cut down Higgs. And I like Carter sort of laugh at the idea of like, now I'm just going to go quietly sit in the back benches. You fucking really? Is this what your plan is here? I don't know. Maybe he's going to create one of those great centrist breakaway parties Stephen Carter's always dreaming about. He'll go do something else and create a vehicle. Create a vehicle like Legault did and try to get himself into government. My suspicion is that it's going to be his next move, because I don't particularly think the NDP is going to be that excited about him, and I don't particularly think the PCs are going to be that excited about him. But he clearly has bigger ambitions, and he's trying to create for himself a space where he's this rational man who can just sort of call bullshit on the Premier's bullshit. And I have to say, like, the date of my ass comment was funny and it sounded damning, but Carter, you've been in government. I've been in government. There are times where you want to say, this is bullshit data. Like, What the fuck do you think you're handing me here? This is like, maybe the sample size is small. Maybe this was an opt-in, group that just, all feel one way and you're using this as supposedly data. Yeah. And then you say, data my ass. You talk to 30 people who think the same thing and they told you that, this is what it's going to be. So I mean, I just don't, that's not enough for me to crucify Higgs, right? Like, I actually want to know more about that particular situation and what was the data that he found particularly suspect. Although, based on the context, and there's a lot of drama around French language education in Quebec, or sorry, not in Quebec, in New Brunswick. I don't know. I'm by default, I'm not inclined to sort of trust Higgs on this one, but I also don't think we have enough to condemn Higgs.
Ooh, Corey,
t-shirt idea. More yelling, less data. Okay. That's the first one. Alternative.
It's a pillow. That's a pillow.
A mug. That's a pillow. A mug that says data my ass, but in binary. Okay. I mean, the ideas are endless.
Oh, that's not bad. That's pretty good.
That's actually not terrible. Yeah, that's actually not terrible. That. Carter, let's end in British Columbia. Fine, fabulous, or fucked. The provincial NDP. David Eby is supposed to be the next premier of British Columbia. He's supposed to be the next leader of the NDP. He's supposed to have a coronation. But there's something going on in British Columbia, because Anjali Apparuddai, a candidate who, late breaking into that race, kind of stopped the coronation, initially was seen by many, and those in British Columbia will probably be like, okay, you're reading this wrong in the sense, but let me baseline it for folks. Was seen to be a candidate that might be able to, create a little bump in the road for the coronation. Soon became a candidate that paid her dues to run very quickly, and is now arguably, depending on the circles that you talk to, with the help of some environmental groups that I'll talk about that in a second, is maybe signed up more members than he has. And there is now a situation in British Columbia where she's being investigated ×2. And there's a possibility that she either gets thrown out of this race, not approved, or her members get thrown out of this race, not approved, or the memberships that have been sold based on support from environmental or climate groups that may have illegally helped to procure and sell some of these memberships. Carter, this leads to the ultimate question. For the BC NDP, is this fine? Bump in the road, internal politics. It happens when you're a government. Is this fabulous?
No.
I doubt it is. Or is this fucked territory?
What am I waiting for you? Well, I'm waiting for you to get the fucked. It's fucked.
I thought there was a lane towards fine, but okay, lay it on me.
If you are the Alberta Party, if you're the Alberta Party, or you're the Progressive Conservative Party, after you've just been annihilated by the NDP, there is a chance that somebody could come in and take over your party, right? Someone could come in and take over your party. If you are the government in British Columbia, there is no way that anybody should come in and take over your party. This is a huge mistake. The government you've got to disqualify this candidate the second her paperwork comes in.
Did we not just literally see that in Alberta last week? I'm so baffled by your comments here.
Yeah, me too.
But she didn't take over the party. She was the party. She is the party. That's the problem with the fucking party. They should have disqualified her the second her paperwork hit. Two things they did wrong. They didn't disqualify her the second her paperwork hit, and they wanted to do a coronation. Do a fucking leadership race, and this doesn't matter anymore because she can't compete. She may be able to compete with one of you. She can't compete with five of you. And they just wanted to do a little coronation. This is the BC NDP trying to hand off between EB and Hogan. And it was a huge fucking strategic mistake that has just been exacerbated by the mistakes that have gone on. Disqualify her early, and she doesn't get 3 months to make her point and turn out to be, I think, frankly, a very solid candidate that's going to make the BC NDP look like fucking morons as they go through this.
Corey, fine or fucked? I'm skipping out on fabulous. It's just fine or fucked for the BC NDP.
You know what? I think it would be almost impossible not to say fucked, right? This is, for many of the reasons Stephen said, this was supposed to be one thing and it became a different thing. And the cleanup job the BC NDP is doing is pretty rough. Like the idea of sending letters to these organizations asking for data on whether they helped. I mean, clearly they're getting PFO letters in return left, right, and center. And of course they should. Why?
And there's also the Green Party overlap. So there's also, asking if certain folks have held membership in the Green Party.
Can I see your membership list, or can you give your membership list to a third party and I'll give my membership list to a third party and we'll see if there's a bunch of overlap? I mean, that's ridiculous. That's utterly ridiculous. And I think in normal political times, the NDP would actually be pretty excited about having a contest that's pulling in people who would otherwise be voting Green. Now it's terrifying because the context is entirely different. And I mean, the idea that the Green Party membership could somehow flood the NDP, even if 100% went over and change the outcome, is also just really wild, right? Really wild. Doesn't make an awful lot of sense. And so it does sort of feel like an expedition to find a reason to have a problem. Where I think we need to spend a little bit of time, even if it's not today, is say, all right, so federally in the Conservatives, they decided they needed to disqualify somebody because they didn't like where it was going. And Patrick in Brown, BC, it looks like that might be happening. And in Alberta, maybe there's a case that it should have happened at some point along the way here, right? Maybe, maybe not. Your mileage will vary on that. Are we ever going to just sort of come clean with the fact that the people who run parties don't actually want one member, one vote systems? They actually see them as broken, as I think many of us do. And is there ever going to be a movement away from these sort of membership sales drive systems that we've got right now? Because it seems like it's becoming impossible to ignore that you can take over a government if you can manage to get 50,000 people off their asses. Yeah, that's pretty mental. That's pretty mental, and it's not like the greatest thing in the world. And so are we going to have this conversation at some time, or have we just decided there's no way to ever do anything but one member, one vote?
Let's have that conversation. Let's not make it now. But Carter, let me close out on a slightly different question, which is related to Corey's point, but it's the price that these parties pay for these sort of actions. Like the Patrick Brown story was a max 72-hour story. And then it was gone. It was not really brought up in the last 2.5 months of that race. And so where I think there might be a lane towards fine here for the NDP, Carter, is if they do what they need to do here, which is, yes, mistakes were made. They get rid of this candidate.
That's so different, though.
No, so
he was never going to win.
This is the nature of the question. This is the nature of the question, right? Is there a broader price to pay here? How is this different? What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, that the full package Ken Bosenkool will tell you that he thinks that the Conservative Party of Canada has lost that voter segment for 10 years. That all the work that Jason Kenney put in, that all the work that has been done by Stephen Harper to build inroads with what was traditionally seen to be a liberal demographic, has been undone by tossing Patrick Brown out. So that's what, and being close to, being in Surrey right now and being close to the Sikh population here, there's an awful lot, of people that used to be conservatives that have moved towards the Liberals. So I think that this is going to be something that it may have only been a 3-day news story, but it may have impacted the people who bought the memberships, the people who were politically active, much, much deeper. And that only time will tell. But that's what the full package Ken Bosencool has been telling me.
Corey, you were interrupting as I was trying to make that point. You wanted to get in there. Well, why is this different?
Because the NDP is worried that Angeli is going to win the contest. It wasn't that they thought Patrick Brown was going to win the contest. They thought Patrick Brown could potentially affect the outcome of the process. And that is actually different. That is different. And you're talking about smaller percents and all of that. And so, well, there are people who are lighting their hair on fire over both, right? Like there were people who said this is unfair and this has changed the Conservative Party membership composition and ultimately the outcome. It's hard not to look at how much Poilievre actually won by and sort of wash that away a bit, right? And so nobody, I think, with the benefit of hindsight is going to say Patrick Brown was going to win, right? And no one with the benefit of hindsight is going to say Patrick Brown could have thrown this to Charest. It was a block. It was changing some dynamics, but it wasn't fundamentally changing the outcome. In BC, we're talking about a heads-up race where it appears from the outside that the BC NDP is terrified and pulling whatever levers they think are available to them to stop her from winning the leadership, changing the outcome. And that puts like a Barry Bond style asterisk on EB's premiership from day one. It is different. And it's the kind of thing that gets thrown back at you forevermore. You won, but you won by cheating. And, you can argue whether you agree with that statement. That is the statement that is going to be made.
That's why they should have acted right away before she had anything vaguely resembling momentum. Because when she put her name in, the vast majority of people were like, I'm sorry, we don't know who this person is. Now she's showing strength, and now you throw her out. Terrible move. Throw her out early and enable the, EB to take the coronation. Now he does look weak, but it's better to look weak than to be weak.
We're going to leave that segment there. I'm going to move it on to our final segment, our over, under, and our lightning round. Stephen Carter. Of course, we're going to do it. We do it for you, Stephen Carter.
Today?
That's nice.
Let me tell you something.
We're really proud of you.
Let me tell you something, Carter. Overrated or underrated? The January 6th committee, in its season finale, so to speak, has issued
it's changed American politics as we speak.
Subpoena for Donald Trump. Overrated, underrated?
I already answered your question.
You think the subpoena for Donald Trump is underrated? Corey, why is it overrated?
Oh, let me count the ways. How about the fact that all of its work has not actually fundamentally changed people's views of Donald Trump? The most significant jeopardy he finds himself in has to do with his actions after the actions on January 6th, and it was taking some documents with him and then trying to conceal it afterwards. In a way, it has been exactly the politicized exercise that was always the risk. You had two Republicans who don't like the guy, and you have a bunch of Democrats, and it's allowed the Republicans to sort of rally around this idea that this is somehow an illegitimate committee. It has the composition, it has the the production values, but ultimately it doesn't have the power to change minds. It's something that is tuned out by the people that are with Donald Trump, and they're talking to a small audience. Now, today's big drama of asking for a subpoena for Donald Trump is the second thing that I think is greatly overrated because, it's going to be court challenges about this, and it's going to push it past the midterms, which means it'll push it past Liz Cheney being on there. It's going to probably push it past, depending on, again, what happens with the House, push it past control of the House by the Democrats, and then there's, boom, it's gone. There's no committee. So what does this matter? At the end of the day, Stephen Carter's hitting himself in his own head.
Is this
book.
Is this
That's not how you get information in there.
Is this the short answer section? Is this the quick? Let's go. Let's rock and roll, Hogan. Rock and roll.
I was so inspired
Let's
by
rock
your
and roll,
answer
Hogan.
about what the Liberals should say at committee that I just
remember when they did have the shot clock and the half court line, so these white dudes could just fucking dribble on their own side in little circles like geese. You ever watch that shit? It's the worst. It's like listening to this podcast. Corey, overrated, underrated. The love Nancy Pelosi is getting for looking like a leader on January 6th as part of the video archives that has now been rolled out. And Pelosi looking like an adult doing her job, trying to keep the country safe. Overrated, underrated.
Overrated. You ultimately don't look like an adult if you're talking about wanting to punch someone in the face. I don't care how much of an asshole they are.
Carter, overrated, underrated, Pelosi, and the heroism kind of revealed for and about Nancy Pelosi in these videos.
Underrated. I've started drawing her with a cape.
Stephen Carter, over under on 7 out of 10. Over under on 7 out of 10. The liberals and their political sort of attack on the Pierre Poilievre story regarding the misogynistic tags on his YouTube videos. They seemed locked and ready. The Liberals did with their lines. Overrated or underrated on 7 in terms of how they hit on Pierre Poilievre on these tags for his videos. And just to fill folks in, there was some tags discovered on some of Pierre Poilievre's videos, including some of the ones he ran in his leadership campaign with the MGTOW tag, which means men going their own way. This was a men's rights movement that these videos were tagged in. Long story short, helps with the algorithm to target those videos in certain directions and to certain eyeballs. Carter, over under on 7, how the Liberals dealt with this, their political attack, their messaging.
It's about a 3. I mean, first of all, I had to call Corey and get him to explain it to me. And that's always upsetting for me because it's one of these things that is technical and difficult to understand and will go over 90% of the people's heads. And when I say 90%, I mean most of the journalists. So it didn't work. It was supposed, it's interesting. It's all of those things, but it's definitely under in terms of its own. But it is a stereotypical perfect liberal attack. One that no one understands and doesn't land.
So you're telling me the attack has possibility, or did, but they just couldn't translate this highly technical thing into plain speak? Is that why I'm hearing, Carter, from you, and what I'm hearing from you?
Yes.
Corey, over
I tried to
7.
translate it into plain speak, but even Corey's language didn't get me there.
Over under on 7, the Liberal
Thanks
attack.
again, Corey. I appreciated your help.
You're welcome, bud. Look, I don't actually think it's very complicated. Pierre Poilievre was trying to promote his videos to people who have misogynistic views. That's not very complicated. But Carter's not wrong that when you start saying, "Oh, really? How?" and it's like, "Well, they use this hashtag, and this hashtag is used by this group, and this group has these views." I mean, it does require a couple of different connections, and I think in general, this is a pretty good illustration of something that probably seemed really good to the war room, but it's hard to imagine it being like this attack that really lands super hard. But it's all part of like this view of Pierre Poilievre, and I'm sure it'll come back. And like, I can imagine it being more effective in a list of 5 things that are identical or, similar misogynism. We're just not there yet. So is it a one-off? Well, I mean, I don't think it's a one-off, just knowing what I know about some of the people around him and some of the causes he's kind of rubbed elbows with. But, it's not enough right now, would be my sense, when we're talking about an election that is still years away.
Corey, final question. I'm gonna start with you. It's been 1 week since you replaced me with Dan Arnold on this podcast for episode 1006 when you did a live stream. It's also been 1 week since Danielle Smith was elected leader of the UCP. Corey, your letter grade for Danielle Smith, 1 week, I can't say into the job, but 1 week since she was elected as the leader of the UCP.
It is a W for what in the hell is happening here. And does any of us have the stamina to get through the next 8 months if they're going to be like the last 8 days?
Corey gives it a W for the classic what the hell is going on here, and do we have the stamina for all of this, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Carter, the letter grade that you are giving Danielle Smith 1 week after being UCP leader.
Dan Arnold was actually better than Danielle Smith has been this week, and that's almost unbelievable. I didn't think that would be possible.
Well, why are you taking a round out of Dan?
Why?
He's a friend.
I'm fucking taking a round out of everybody tonight. That's just where I am.
That's good. Let's wrap it there. Let's leave it there. That's a wrap on episode 1007 of The Strategist. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Stephen Carter, Corey Hogan, and we'll see you next time.